me! Lift me!
The Exorcist wasn't just a groundbreaking horror film. It was a production cursed with real-life tragedies, psychological breakdowns, and unexplained phenomena that haunted the cast and crew long after filming wrapped. During production, the set mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground. Multiple actors suffered serious injuries, including a permanent spinal injury. Religious protesters threatened the young star with death, and audience members worldwide collapsed in theaters, requiring medical intervention after viewing certain scenes. Today, I'm revealing 20 weird facts about The Exorcist that will forever change how you see this landmark film. And stick around for the bonus fact. The chilling discovery director William Friedkin made decades after the film's release that convinced even him there might be supernatural forces at work. Number 20. The film's set mysteriously burned to the ground. Production wasn't just delayed, it was nearly destroyed entirely. In January 1973, with just a few days of shooting remaining, a mysterious fire erupted on the set of The Exorcist. The blaze completely demolished the MacNeil home interior set, leaving nothing but charred remains. What's eerie isn't just the destruction, but that the only part of the set untouched by flames was Regan's bedroom, the epicenter of the film's demonic activity. Friedkin didn't just restart production. He transformed the disaster into fuel for the cast's growing unease. The fire was like something didn't want us to finish, actress Ellen Burstyn later recalled. Insurance covered the $200,000 damage, equivalent to over $1.3 million today. But what couldn't be repaired was the psychological impact on the already rattled production team. The fire added 6 weeks to the schedule and became the first in a string of inexplicable events that convinced many the production was genuinely cursed. Number 19. Ellen Burstyn suffered a permanent spinal injury on camera. It wasn't an act. It was real agony captured on film. During the scene where Regan slaps her mother across the room, Ellen Burstyn was yanked backward by a stuntman pulling a wire attached to her waist. Friedkin wanted authenticity, not acting. He told the crew member to pull harder on the second take without warning Burstyn. The actress didn't just fall. She screamed in genuine pain as her coccyx permanently fractured. I told him the harness was too tight. He said, "It's not going to break." Burstyn later revealed, "I landed on my coccyx and was in pain for years. I still feel it sometimes." What appears on screen isn't a performance, but documentary footage of serious injury. Friedkin didn't call for medical help. He kept the cameras rolling, capturing the harrowing aftermath of Burstyn struggling to regain composure while fighting tears. That scream of pain and the anguished expression were incorporated directly into the final cut. Real suffering immortalized for cinematic effect. Number 18. The freezing. Bedroom scenes weren't special effects. The visible breath wasn't added in post-production. It was the result of brutal filming conditions. To achieve the supernatural cold that accompanies demonic presence, Friedkin didn't rely on the standard Hollywood trick of adding visible breath later. He transformed Regan's bedroom into a genuine freezer, dropping temperatures to an excruciating 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Crew members wore Arctic expedition gear, while Linda Blair performed in only a thin nightgown. The refrigeration machinery was so loud that all dialogue had to be re-recorded later. The brutal cold caused equipment failures, cracked camera lenses, and even frosted the crew's eyebrows between takes. It was beyond uncomfortable, recalled Linda Blair. My skin would turn blue between takes. They'd rush in with warm blankets until they needed to roll again. The 4 massive air conditioners required their own dedicated power line. For the actors, each 10-minute take in these conditions was an endurance test that produced authentic shivering, physical discomfort, and the visible breath that became one of the film's most chilling visual signatures. Number 17. 9 people associated with the film died during production. The curse wasn't just superstition. It claimed real lives. Over the compressed 17-month production period, 9 people connected to The Exorcist died unexpectedly. Actor Jack McGowan, who played alcoholic director Burke Dennings, passed away from influenza before the film was released. Max von Sydow's brother died suddenly on the first day the actor was scheduled to film. Actress Vasiliki Maliaros, who played Father Karras's mother, died before the film premiered. The tragedies expanded beyond the cast. Linda Blair's grandfather died during the second week of shooting. A night watchman and a special effects expert both passed unexpectedly. A cameraman's newborn baby died tragically. There was a feeling that something didn't want this movie made, production assistant Terrence Donnelly later said. The accumulation of deaths created such unease that Friedkin ultimately asked a Jesuit priest to perform a blessing of the set, not as a publicity stunt, but as a genuine attempt to address what many crew members had come to believe was supernatural interference with the production. Number 16. Linda Blair received genuine death threats. The backlash wasn't just controversy, it was dangerous obsession. 12-year-old Linda Blair didn't just portray a possessed child. She became the target of religious extremists convinced she had actually consorted with the devil. Death threats flooded the studio, many containing detailed descriptions of how the young actress would be punished for her blasphemy. Warner Brothers was forced to hire round-the-clock security for Blair for 6 months following the film's release. The FBI became involved after multiple credible threats were identified. Blair couldn't attend public events without bodyguards and was removed from school due to safety concerns. "I spent my teenage years looking over my shoulder," Blair revealed years later. "Some people truly couldn't separate me from the character." The trauma was so severe that Blair developed anxiety and panic disorders that she still manages today. The irony wasn't lost on the production team. The fictional demonic torment on screen had unleashed very real human demons who tormented a child actress simply for playing a role. Number 15. The demon's voice has a dark, personal history. The voice wasn't just performed, it was excavated from personal demons. Mercedes McCambridge didn't simply record demonic dialogue for Regan's possession scenes. The Oscar-winning actress underwent a harrowing physical and psychological ordeal to achieve the inhuman sounds. A recovering alcoholic, McCambridge deliberately relapsed to tap into her addiction demons, consuming raw eggs, chain-smoking, and drinking whiskey during recording sessions until she vomited. To create the demonic growls, technicians bound her to a chair, tying her hands behind her back until the restraints cut into her wrists. The pain and rage would just well up, sound engineer Ron Nagel recalled. McCambridge demanded the crew bind me like an animal to generate authentic suffering. What few knew was that McCambridge's son would later murder his wife and children before taking his own life. A tragedy some crew members uncomfortably connected to the darkness she channeled for the film. Initially uncredited for her work, McCambridge had to threaten legal action to receive proper acknowledgement, adding another layer to the production's troubled legacy. Number 14. Audience members experienced physical trauma during screenings. The reactions weren't just shock, they were medical emergencies. When The Exorcist premiered, theaters didn't just fill with viewers, they became triage centers. Paramount Pictures documented 40 cases of audience members fainting per showing in some theaters. Vomiting became so common that ushers started carrying smelling salts and sick bags. Multiple heart attacks occurred, including a fatal one in a London cinema. In San Francisco, a man charged the screen trying to kill the demon before being restrained. Ambulances became a common sight outside theaters nationwide. Psychiatric hotlines reported spikes in anxiety-related calls following screenings. "We didn't expect physical reactions of that magnitude," producer William Peter Blatty admitted. Some theaters hired nurses to staff screenings. Catholic dioceses around the country were flooded with calls from terrified viewers seeking spiritual guidance. The film didn't just frighten audiences. It triggered physiological fight-or-flight responses on a scale never before documented in cinema. Psychiatrists later classified the phenomenon as cinematic neurosis, studying The Exorcist as the first film to consistently induce trauma responses in otherwise healthy viewers. Number 13. Director William Friedkin fired guns on set to elicit reactions. His methods weren't unconventional. They were psychological warfare. Friedkin didn't just direct The Exorcist. He manipulated, terrorized, and shocked his cast into authentic fear responses. Without warning, he would fire a .38 revolver loaded with blanks next to actors' ears just before calling action. During Father Karras's dream sequence, Jason Miller's startled reaction is genuine. Friedkin had unexpectedly discharged the weapon inches from his head. The psychological tactics extended beyond firearms. Friedkin slapped actor William O'Malley hard across the face before filming his emotional final scene. He deliberately fostered animosity between actors by telling them lies about what others had said. To achieve the freezing breath effect in Regan's room, he refused to let the cast warm up between takes despite hypothermia risks. "You can't simulate fear," Friedkin later defended. The reactions had to be real. Ellen Burstyn confronted him after her injury. What is more important, the film or the human being? His answer was simple: the film. This ruthless commitment to emotional authenticity came at a psychological cost that many cast members later described as traumatic. Number 12. Father Merrin's actor was younger than Father Karras. In one of Hollywood's most effective aging transformations, Max von Sydow wasn't the elderly priest audiences perceived. At just 44 years old, von Sydow was actually younger than Jason Miller, 47, who played Father Karras. The iconic opening scene of Merrin facing the statue of Pazuzu features a middle-aged man transformed through Dick Smith's groundbreaking makeup techniques. Each day, von Sydow endured 4 hours of prosthetic application. Thin plastic pieces were meticulously layered to create realistic skin folds. Strands of his real hair were pulled through a bald cap and whitened individually. The makeup was so convincing that when von Sydow's elderly father visited the set, he broke down in tears, seeing what he believed was his son's future appearance. "I couldn't recognize myself," von Sydow recalled. "I felt the weight of those years." The transformation wasn't just physical, but psychological. Von Sydow adopted the measured movements and emotional gravity of a man decades his senior. This casting illusion created the perfect vessel for the film's themes of age, experience, and the weathering effects of lifelong spiritual battle. Number 11. Subliminal images and sounds were engineered to trigger anxiety. The fear wasn't just from what you consciously saw. It was scientifically engineered psychological manipulation. Throughout The Exorcist, Friedkin didn't just tell a frightening story. He employed cutting-edge psychological techniques to bypass viewers' conscious defenses. The film contains multiple subliminal frames of the demon Pazuzu's face, flashing for just 1 to 24th of a second, too brief for conscious recognition, but long enough for the brain's threat detection systems to register. More insidious was the soundtrack. Sound designer Ron Nagel incorporated recordings of angry bees, pigs being slaughtered, and human screams processed to remove recognizable elements. These sounds play at frequencies designed to trigger anxiety responses below the threshold of conscious hearing. "We weren't just making a film," Nagel later admitted. "We were conducting a psychological experiment." Medical researchers later studied the film's techniques after documenting how consistently it triggered physical stress responses. The subliminal approach proved so effective that several countries initially banned the film, citing concerns about psychological manipulation. Modern horror filmmakers still study Friedkin's techniques as the gold standard for bypassing rational thought to access primal fear. Number 10. The iconic poster image was a lucky accident. The haunting image of Father Merrin arriving at the MacNeil house, silhouetted in a cone of streetlight with fog swirling around him, wasn't a calculated shot. It was a last-minute addition captured by set photographer Bob Willoughby, who wasn't even supposed to be on location that night. When filming ran late into the early morning hours, Willoughby decided to stay rather than return the next day. As Max von Sydow took his position for what was considered a transitional scene, unexpected fog rolled in from the Potomac River. The street lamp, initially a mere practical light source, created the dramatic shaft of illumination by chance. Willoughby captured just 3 frames before the fog shifted. When Warner Brothers executives saw the contact sheets, they immediately recognized something iconic. "That's not just a photo, that's a statement," marketing director Bill Friedkin declared. The image needed no title, no stars, no tagline, just a silhouette that promised something between spiritual thriller and supernatural horror. The poster became so influential that it's now studied in design schools as a masterclass in visual storytelling through minimalism, all from an accidental moment that almost went uncaptured. Number 9. Linda Blair's performance was enhanced by a cruel trick. In the psychiatric evaluation scenes, Regan's vulnerable, frightened responses weren't just skilled child acting. Friedkin orchestrated genuine emotional distress in 12-year-old Linda Blair. Before filming, he privately instructed the actor playing the doctor to suddenly slap Blair hard across the face during their scene, something neither in the script nor discussed with Blair or her mother. When the slap came, Blair's shock, tears, and betrayed expression were entirely authentic. The camera caught real trauma, not performance. The crew was stunned into silence. Blair later described feeling completely violated by the experience. Her mother threatened to remove her from the production, forcing Friedkin to promise no more unscripted physical contact. "I needed that reaction," Friedkin later defended. "You can't fake that kind of fear." This manipulative approach extended throughout production. Blair was often kept in the dark about frightening special effects until they occurred live on camera. The hydraulic bed that violently bucked beneath her repeatedly caused injuries. Warner Brothers kept quiet through production. What appeared as masterful child acting was often a document of genuine childhood distress, orchestrated by an uncompromising director. Number 8. The film resulted in worldwide exorcism panic. Following The Exorcist's release, Catholic dioceses worldwide reported an unprecedented surge in exorcism requests, increasing from approximately 50 per year in the US to over 600 in the months after the film premiered. In Mexico, special church counseling centers were established specifically to handle the volume of suddenly possessed individuals. Mental health professionals documented what they termed exorcist syndrome, patients with no previous psychiatric history suddenly reporting demonic symptoms matching those depicted in the film. In one tragic case, a German student committed suicide after becoming convinced he was possessed following a screening. "We inadvertently created a kind of mass hysteria," William Peter Blatty, the novel's author, later admitted. "People were finding demons everywhere." Several deaths occurred during amateur exorcism attempts inspired by the film. The Vatican eventually issued a formal statement clarifying exorcism protocols and warning against spiritual panic. The phenomenon revealed the film's unprecedented psychological impact. It hadn't just frightened audiences, but had reshaped their perception of reality, demonstrating cinema's power to trigger mass psychological contagion that blurred the boundary between fiction and belief. Number 7. The spider walk scene was cut because it was too disturbing. One of the most disturbing sequences filmed, Regan spider walking down the stairs backward on all fours with blood pouring from her mouth, was removed from the original cut, not for pacing or narrative reasons, but because test audiences experienced such extreme distress that multiple viewers required medical attention. The scene was achieved through a combination of contortionist work by a stand-in and practical effects. Linda Blair's stunt double, professional contortionist Ann Miles, performed the initial movement with her body bent impossibly backward. For close-ups, a mechanized dummy with hydraulic limbs created movements that appeared to violate human anatomical limitations. It was genuinely disturbing, even to those of us who created it, editor Bud Smith recalled. Something about the movement triggered a primal fear response. Neurological researchers later studied footage of the scene, documenting how it activated the brain's uncanny valley response, the region responsible for detecting when something appears human but moves unnaturally. Warner Brothers executives made the unprecedented decision to remove a technically perfect, expensive effects sequence solely because it was deemed too psychologically damaging to viewers. The scene remained unseen until the 2000 re-release, by which time visual effects had progressed enough that audiences had developed higher thresholds for the uncanny. Number 6. The film was based on a real exorcism case. William Peter Blatty didn't create the story from imagination. He based it on the documented 1949 exorcism of a 14-year-old boy in Maryland. As a Georgetown University student, Blatty read newspaper accounts of a months-long exorcism performed on a boy identified in church documents as Roland Doe. The Washington Post ran the headline, "Priest frees boy of devil, church says." The real case contained elements even more disturbing than those portrayed in the film. According to Jesuit records Blatty accessed, words appeared carved into the boy's flesh without explanation. Objects levitated in his presence. During the exorcism, the boy allegedly spoke Aramaic, a language he had never studied. One priest involved suffered a broken nose when the boy's bed violently lifted off the ground. "I toned down what actually happened," Blatty later admitted. The real case was far more violent and inexplicable. The Catholic Church still maintains sealed records of the case, which involved over 30 exorcism sessions. The boy reportedly recovered completely and lived a normal life, with his identity protected by the church. Certain details Blatty included came directly from the priest's journal, including the bed levitation and the boy's supernatural strength, which threw one priest across a room. Number 5. The film contains genuine medical procedures. The medical scenes weren't just accurate, they were uncomfortably real. The extended sequence of Regan's medical testing wasn't Hollywood approximation, but actual medical procedures filmed in documentary style. Real physicians were hired to perform genuine diagnostic tests, including the cerebral angiography, the traumatic scene where arterial blood is visibly drawn from Regan's neck. The medical equipment wasn't props, but functioning hospital technology. The cerebrospinal fluid extraction shows genuine medical technique. Even the carotid angiogram, where dye is injected into Regan's neck artery to trace blood flow to her brain, was performed with clinical accuracy rarely seen in cinema. We wanted audiences to feel the invasive violation of these procedures, Friedkin explained. The clinical violence needed to be as disturbing as the supernatural elements. Medical professionals consulting on the film insisted the scenes be technically perfect. The pneumoencephalogram sequence showing air injected into Regan's spinal column accurately depicts a painful procedure largely abandoned by modern medicine due to its traumatic nature. These clinical scenes created a disturbing fusion of documentary realism with supernatural horror, grounding the demonic possession in painful medical reality that many viewers found more disturbing than the explicit supernatural elements that followed. Number 4. Studio executives tried to scrap the iconic opening sequence. The vision wasn't supported. It was nearly destroyed by corporate oversight. The haunting prologue in Iraq, where Father Marin confronts the Pazuzu statue amid howling dogs and whipping winds, faced elimination by Warner Brothers executives who considered it confusing, expensive, and disconnected from the main Georgetown storyline. Shot on location in Mosul and the ancient city of Hatra, the sequence consumed nearly 20% of the film's budget despite representing just 4 minutes of screen time. Temperatures reaching 130-degree VR melted camera equipment and caused multiple crew members to collapse from heat exhaustion. They wanted to cut it completely, Friedkin revealed in later interviews. They couldn't understand why we needed to be in Iraq for a story set in Washington, D.C. The production shipped over 2,000 pounds of equipment to the remote location and constructed massive wind machines to create the dust storm. The sequence required 83 local extras, 40 horses, and 3 weeks of shooting for the brief sequence. Friedkin threatened to quit if the sequence was cut, arguing it established the ancient global nature of the demonic entity and provided crucial context for Marin's later appearance. The compromise was brutal editing that reduced 25 minutes of footage to just 4 minutes. But those minutes set the mythological foundation that elevated the film beyond a mere Georgetown haunting to a battle with ancient evil. Number 3. The vomit scene required military technology. The effect wasn't just gross, it was weaponized industrial engineering. The infamous scene where Regan projectile vomits green bile onto Father Karras wasn't created with simple practical effects. It required repurposed military technology, specifically a modified version of pressure equipment designed for fire suppression systems on aircraft carriers. The mechanism, hidden under Linda Blair's prosthetic makeup, could propel the pea soup mixture at nearly 60 psi, enough force to potentially cause injury. The technical challenge was so complex that the first 8 attempts failed catastrophically, soaking the set but missing Jason Miller entirely. For the 9th and successful take, special effects coordinator Marcel Vercouter recalibrated the rig to deliver maximum velocity. What appears on screen is Miller's genuine shock. The impact was far more forceful than he'd been told to expect, and the mixture was significantly colder than disgust. His recoil and disgust aren't acting, but authentic reaction to being unexpectedly struck with substantial force. "We basically built a weapon," Vercouter later admitted. "The pressure could have caused injury if it had hit him directly in the eye." The substance itself was a proprietary blend including pea soup, oatmeal, and technical components still kept secret by the effects team. The trajectory was calculated so precisely that the mixture appears to defy gravity, a subliminal detail that adds to the scene's supernatural quality. Number 2. The exorcism ritual was authentic enough to alarm the Vatican. The ritual wasn't just researched, it was dangerously legitimate. The film's exorcism scenes weren't Hollywood invention, but a meticulously researched recreation of the Catholic Church's genuine Ritual Romanum, the official exorcism rite established in 1614. Jesuit technical advisor Father John Nicola provided Friedkin with Latin texts and procedural details so accurate that Vatican officials expressed serious concern about public exposure of restricted religious material. The production received multiple communications from church authorities warning that performing the ritual, even as dramatic recreation, might invite unwanted spiritual attention. These concerns weren't treated as superstition, but with serious consideration. Friedkin insisted on blessing the set each morning before filming exorcism scenes. "We weren't just depicting a ritual," Father Nicola later revealed. "We were performing substantive elements of it." Max von Sydow, raised in a devoutly religious household, repeatedly expressed discomfort with the authenticity of the material. Several crew members refused to be present during filming of these sequences, citing religious objections. The Latin phrases, ritual elements, and priestly preparations shown on screen remain so technically accurate that modern exorcists have noted only minor theatrical embellishments. This authenticity contributed significantly to the film's psychological impact on religious viewers, who recognized genuine sacred elements being enacted in a fictional context, creating a disturbing boundary violation between sacred ritual and entertainment. Number 1. The film's most disturbing scene was a last-minute addition. The crucifix scene wasn't planned. It was a desperate escalation. The most controversial sequence in the film, where Regan violates herself with a crucifix, wasn't in the original shooting script. It was added during a production crisis, when Friedkin feared the possession scenes weren't shocking enough to convey true demonic presence. The scene was filmed using an adult hand, double rather than Blair, with mechanical effects creating the bloody aftermath. Blair's mother was deliberately kept away from set during filming. Warner Brothers executives were so disturbed by the footage, they demanded its removal, leading to a confrontation where Friedkin threatened legal action if his artistic vision was compromised. "We needed something genuinely transgressive," Friedkin later explained. "Something that violated not just social norms, but spiritual boundaries." Catholic groups organized nationwide protests when word of the scene leaked before release. Multiple countries, including the UK, demanded its removal before allowing theatrical distribution. What most viewers don't know is that Friedkin actually shot a more explicit version that included frontal nudity and additional dialogue so disturbing that several crew members walked off set. This footage was destroyed at Warner Brothers' insistence, with legal documents preventing anyone involved from describing its specific content. The version that made the final cut, shocking as it remains, represents a compromise between Friedkin's boundary-pushing vision and the studio's fear of legal consequences. Bonus fact: in 2013, 40 years after The Exorcist's release, William Friedkin was invited to the Vatican by Father Gabriele Amorth, the church's chief exorcist. Skeptical throughout his career about supernatural phenomena, Friedkin agreed to witness an actual exorcism performed on an Italian woman who had undergone multiple sessions. What Friedkin documented shattered his materialist worldview. The woman, restrained by family members, displayed phenomena eerily similar to Regan's fictional possession, including speaking in languages unknown to her, a dramatically altered voice, and facial transformations that defied medical explanation. Most disturbing to Friedkin was her knowledge of private details about his life that she couldn't possibly have known. "I went in a skeptic and left unable to explain what I witnessed," Friedkin revealed in a rare 2016 interview. "I saw things that can't be faked. Physical transformations no special effects could achieve." The experience led Friedkin to publicly revise his lifelong position that the film was merely effective fiction. The director who had terrified millions with his vision of possession ultimately found himself questioning the boundaries between storytelling and reality. "The irony isn't lost on me," Friedkin admitted. "I spent decades dismissing the supernatural elements, only to witness something in my 70s that forced me to reconsider everything." The master of horror had finally confronted something he found truly horrifying: the possibility that his fictional nightmare might have more reality than he ever imagined. If you enjoyed these disturbing revelations, hit subscribe for more videos that take you behind the scenes of cinema's most iconic moments. And let me know in the comments, after learning these facts, will you ever watch The Exorcist the same way again? Because sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction.